Yu-Gi-Oh loves retrains, and it feels like they're literally everywhere now, from Dark Magician and Blue Eyes to things as recent as Deco Talker and some Cybers monsters. But some of my favorite retrains aren't centered around anime nostalgia. Samorg is a classic Yu-Gi-Oh monster that eventually got its own archetype, and it sticks to the tribute style gameplay while incorporating modern elements. Daedalus and Umi have recently been upgraded, but generally have had support throughout the years, and Horus did get an archetype of its own, although it didn't inherit the level mechanic or spell protection. But another monster that falls into this retrain category that rarely gets spoken about is Nephthys. This is a very strong card in GOAT format, and we've seen plenty of variations of it, from a dark counterpart to a Metaphys variant, and even a chaos version. But in 2018, Konami decided to expand upon its story with the Nephthys Archetype, but it was quickly forgotten. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the Nephthys Archetype and why it never really took off. But before we get into it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started. The Nephthys archetype debuted in Hidden Summoners in November of 2018, but of course Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys was released in Flaming Eternity in March of 2005. Its effect reads: once per turn, during your standby phase after this card was destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, special summon this card from the graveyard. If you do, destroy all spell and traps on the field. A very powerful removal tool for its day. And for some reason, I always get this mixed up with Horus the Black Flame Dragon. They both are Dragon-esque monsters that feature the Dark Magical Circle in their background and have humanoid counterparts, but unfortunately their respective archetypes are not similar in power level. And speaking of human counterparts, Hand of Nephthys was also released with Phoenix, and it can tribute itself and another monster to summon Nephthys from the deck. So not much to go off of for future inspiration, but Konami chose to carry over the destruction element and the standby phase effects. The new cards were centered around ritual summoning, which thematically works as the original cards were a monster and its acolyte. Starting with the main deck monsters, we have Disciple of Nephthys. During your main phase, you can destroy one card in your hand, and if you do, add one Nephthys monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. During your standby phase, after this card was destroyed by a card effect and sent to the grave, you can add one Nephthys spell or trap from your deck to your hand. This is of course one of the best cards in the deck because it searches, but it is a little awkward because you effectively have to search your spells and traps on delay, but generally a strong card. And the rest of the effect monsters follow the same design, having an on-field effect which involves popping a card in your hand, and a standby phase effect that triggers if it was destroyed. Matriarch is an in-archetype monster reborn that destroys a card in your hand and summons itself back during your standby phase. Chronicler recycles a Nephthys card from your grave by popping a card in your hand, and recycles a card during your next standby phase after it was destroyed. And Defender pops a card in your hand to summon a level 4 or lower monster from your hand, and after it's destroyed on your next standby phase, you can destroy a Nephthys monster in your deck. My biggest gripe with these monsters is that they have to destroy a card in your hand. Destroying monsters in the hand isn't bad, but not having the option of destroying cards in the field kind of sucks. I think that's some sort of a weird balancing choice so they can't destroy themselves on the field and trigger their own effects, but it's a little frustrating. However, a big advantage of these effects is that the card you destroy in your hand does not have to be a Nephthys card. So you have the opportunity to mix this deck with anything that triggers when it's destroyed. And the first thing that came to many players' mind was Fire Kings. This is before the second Fire King structure deck, but there were still strong cards like the original Garunix, Barong, and Avarda. And most of the Fire Kings trigger during the next standby phase instead of your next standby phase, like the Nephthys cards. But Konami recognized this synergy as well as Hidden Summoners reprinted Onslaught of the Fire Kings and Circle of the Fire Kings, although they didn't reprint any of the monsters. And from a visual perspective, these are a nice pairing, but another engine choice was Dinos, as you could pop the baby in your hand to summon an Oviraptor from the deck, and then do whatever you want from there. But going back to the Nephthys cards, we have our ritual monsters, of which there are 3. Devotee is a level 2 ritual, which can special summon a Nephthys monster from your deck on summon, but it's destroyed during the end phase, and while it's in your grave, you can destroy a Nephthys card in your hand to special summon it. So on summon it's a +1, and in the grave it can bring itself back and set up your monster effects on your following standby phase. But it won't be able to use the first effect again, as that only occurs when it's ritual summoned. The other level 2 ritual is Conductor of Nephthys, which actually came out in 2020's Phantom Revenge, and you can kind of tell it's more recent based on how strong its effect is compared to the other cards. You can ritual summon this card with Rebirth of Nephthys. If this card is ritual summoned, you can special summon one Nephthys ritual monster from your hand or deck except itself, and this is treated as a ritual summon. If this card is tributed or destroyed by a Nephthys card effect, you can activate this effect. During the next standby phase, destroy up to 3 Nephthys cards except ritual monsters, 1 each from your hand, deck, and field. This card adds a lot of tempo to the deck, being able to summon another ritual from the deck, and importantly, it's treated as a ritual summon so it can trigger Devotee's effect, and get another monster on the field. Its second effect will trigger if it's destroyed or attributed, so you can use it for a ritual summon, and it triggers during the next standby phase instead of your next standby phase, making it way better than the other monsters. And finally, we get to the boss monster of the new archetype, Cerulean Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys. You can ritual summon this card with Rebirth of Nephthys. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During your main phase, you can destroy Nephthys cards in your hand and face up on the field, then destroy an equal number of monsters your opponent controls. During your next standby phase, after this card was destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. Just reading this card, it's okay. It brings itself back, and the pop effect is strong as it triggers your cards, but within the archetype, it's a little weird. You can cheat it out with Conductor, but in the event you can't, you either need to use the OG Nephthys, another copy of itself, or 4 of your main deck monsters, and surprisingly the ritual spell doesn't help that much. Rebirth is a fairly standard ritual spell, except if you tributed Devotee or Cerulean, you can destroy a card on the field, which is cool, but nothing special. It would be nice if it destroyed monsters used for its summon instead of tributing, but I guess Konami thought that would be too much. But the archetype can utilize a lot of generic ritual support, which kind of helps. You can use Preparation of Rites because 2 of the 3 rituals are level 7 or lower. All of the ritual monsters mention the ritual spell Rebirth of Nephthys, so you can run pre-Preparation of Rites, and you can use Ragged Records of Rites, although none of the non-ritual monsters mention the ritual spell. So it's good, but not as effective in decks like Ritual of Light and Darkness or Mitsurugi. But the only other spell in the archetype is Last Hope of Nephthys, which can target a Nephthys card you control and one card your opponent controls and destroy both. So basically a Regeki break, but it's not a quick effect. It is nice that the deck has a piece of interaction, but another very lackluster card. And Awakening of Nephthys is a frustrating card as well. It does boost all your monsters by 300 attack, but the better effect is that if it's destroyed while face up on the field, you can summon a Nephthys monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, but it's destroyed during the end phase. The 300 attack points help somewhat as the level 2 monsters are very small, but the real issue is that the summoning effect can only be triggered if it's destroyed face up. So most of the monsters can't trigger it because they specifically destroy cards in the hand. The original Nephthys can, which is nice, but it's not really the focal point of the new strategy. And finally, we get to the last 2 cards, which are the Link monsters, starting with Nephthys the Sacred Preserver. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During your main phase, if this card was Link summoned, you can activate one of these effects. Add 1 level 8 Winged Beast monster from your deck to your hand, then you can add 1 ritual spell from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy 1 Nephthys monster this card points to, and special summon 1 Nephthys monster with a different original name from your graveyard, but negate its effects. I think this is one of the few good cards in the archetype. It's not generic, requiring 2 Nephthys monsters, but the search is pretty strong. It's intended to search the original or the ritual. You can also search both versions of Fire King Garunix, and the second effect is also pretty good, letting you cycle through your monsters and set up their effects. And lastly, we have Nephthys the Sacred Flame, which I guess you could say is the win more card. While this card is in the extra monster zone, your opponent cannot target Nephthys monsters in the main monster zone for attacks. This card gains effects based on the number of ritual monsters used for its Link summon. 1 or more cannot be destroyed by battle. 2 or more cannot be destroyed by card effects, also it gains 1200 attack. 3, neither player can target this card with card effects, also it gains another 1200 attack. Kind of similar to the rest of the cards, not bad, but not incredible. Using 2 ritual monsters isn't that hard, but 3 is a lot. I imagine this was intended as a finisher instead of an end board piece because the resources you have to invest into it, so with that context I guess it's fine. And interestingly, this is generic to make for ritual decks, only requiring 1 ritual monster, although I'm not sure you'd want to play it in any other ritual deck. The first big glaring issue is that you have to wait till your next standby phase for most of your effects. If the deck had some turn 0 cards, this wouldn't be that bad, as they'd be able to trigger during your next standby phase, which would be your first standby phase. But that kind of card design was non-existent in 2018. And I understand the original Nephthys worked this way, so they wanted to incorporate that in the new cards, but it cripples the deck severely. And on the topic of speed, this deck has no quick effects. You're not interacting with your opponent on their turn unless you have hand traps or are running another engine. I really think Awakening of Nephthys should have had some sort of quick effect destruction or even negate. And another thing that stuck out to me about this archetype is that it only has 2 spell cards. They don't have a field spell or a spell that searches. I did mention that a lot of generic ritual support works with the deck, but it's not the same as having an in-archetype search spell. And it's especially strange considering that Prank Kids and Mayakashi both had search spells and hidden summoners. And the only way to search your spells and traps in this deck is with Disciple, and even then your searches will be on delay because it has to be destroyed and then activate during your next standby phase. And this would make sense in a slower format, but even in 2018, this deck was not up to pace. Decks like Dark Warrior, Trickstar, Altergeist, Thunder Dragon, and Sky Striker were all relevant, and this pales in comparison to all of them. And generally, it just feels like a massive oversight not having a search spell. And I think this is unfortunately one of those archetypes that's completely dead and buried. New support can only fix so much, unless they want to remake every card, which would effectively be starting over. As I mentioned earlier, turn 0 cards would be interesting because if you go second but are able to pop your cards on your opponent's first turn, your next standby phase will be your first turn, but you need 2 or 3 cards that function that way for the deck to be consistent. They could also incorporate monsters that trigger when they're destroyed as opposed to during your next standby phase. This would give the deck a lot more speed, but the defining characteristic of the effects is that they trigger during the standby phase, so the deck would lose a bit of its identity. But generally, I think if you're a Nephthys enjoyer, you should just play Fire King, or hope that they make another Nephthys archetype. But that's the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, and consider subscribing to the channel. What's your favorite old school Yu-Gi-Oh card that got its own archetype? Leave it in the comments below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.